Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Munchetti.
Our headlines today. A 38-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murdering the primary school teacher Sabina Nessa in southeast London.
The government is coming under mounting pressure to act after a shortage of lorry drivers causes some petrol stations to close.
Fuel, just the latest industry to be hit by that driver shortages. There are now mounting calls to change the visa rules to allow more foreign drivers to work in the UK.
Good morning. The wait is almost over with the Ryder Cup starting in just a few hours' time. Team Europe are the underdogs with nearly all of the 40,000 fans at Whistling Straits backing Team USA. But Europe have the more experience as they try to retain the trophy.
And there are some dense fog patches around this morning, particularly on the hills in the south and the west, with a lot of cloud across western areas today. Get the sunshine though, it is going to feel warm. I'll have your full forecast here on Breakfast.
And Strictly's back tomorrow night. We find out how this year's contestants are feeling ahead of the big day.
Good morning. It's Friday the 24th of September. A 38-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of primary school teacher Sabina Nessa.
Her body was found in a park in London last weekend. Officers have also released images of another person they'd like to speak to in connection with the investigation. Sean Dilley now reports.
Do you recognise this man? If you do, police would like to hear from you, as your information could help officers investigating Sabina Nessa's death. Police believe the 28-year-old primary school teacher was attacked as she walked through Cater Park in southeast London on her way to meet a friend.
We believe as she walked through the park, she was approached by an individual and fatally attacked. Sabina's body was sadly found by a member of the public, and we are appealing for anyone who was here on Friday evening and who thinks they saw anything unusual to come forward.
Last night's arrest was the second in a case that's hit local people hard. The many poignant tributes reflect a community's loss as people young and old try to understand. The other arrested man, who's in his 40s, was released under investigation earlier this week. Detectives believe Sabina Nessa was attacked around 8:30 on Friday night, shortly after leaving her nearby home on Astle Road. She had been on her way to meet a friend at the Depot Bar. Her body was found near the OneSpace community centre on Saturday afternoon. Sabina's sister has been sharing police updates on Twitter and paid her own tributes to her beautiful, talented and caring sister. She said her family never thought this could happen to them. Police are appealing for anyone who may have any information about Sabina's death to come forward. People in the Kidbrooke and wider Lewisham and Greenwich areas are asked to pay special attention to these CCTV images. Any information could hold the key to what led to the teacher's death. Sean Dilley, BBC News.
The closure of some petrol stations has reignited a row over lorry driver shortages, which have disrupted supply chains across the UK.
After a number of stations had to close because of a lack of available fuel, the Road Haulage Association has urged the government to reconsider relaxing visa requirements for lorry drivers. Here's more from our business correspondent, Theo Leggett.
Petrol stations with no petrol or diesel. Yet another consequence of the national shortage of lorry drivers. The fuel giant BP supplies about 1,200 outlets across the country. Some have had to close temporarily, while others have run out of one or more types of fuel. Rival supplier Esso says it's also experienced problems. At a small number of the sites it operates in partnership with Tesco. The problem isn't a lack of fuel. There's plenty available at the country's refineries. But there simply aren't enough tanker drivers to take it to petrol stations. It's part of a much wider problem, a national shortage of lorry drivers.
Well, it's happened because of a multitude of factors. We've had Brexit, we've lost about 20,000 European drivers. We lost 40,000 trucker training tests during the pandemic because of social distancing rules. Those tests were cancelled. And we had a historic shortage in this country of tens of thousands of lorry drivers. And that means we've got a shortage now of 100,000.
That's already led to bare shelves in supermarkets and other stores, which people within the sector have warned are likely to get worse in the run-up to Christmas. The haulage industry body Logistics UK says the shortage is a very serious issue. but it's warned consumers against panic buying fuel. That's a call echoed by the government, which says people should refuel as normal. It points out it's already taken steps to make training new HGV drivers quicker and easier. Not all petrol retailers are affected by the current problems. Morrison's, Co-op and Sainsbury's say their petrol stations are operating as normal. But the fact shortages are occurring at all has highlighted once again how supply chains in the UK are coming under intense strain. Theo Leggett, BBC News.
Let's speak now to our political correspondent Nick Eardley, who's in Westminster. Morning to you, Nick. So where are we with this latest issue around supply chains?
Morning, Charlie. Well, the message from the government is very much that there's plenty of petrol, there's just not enough drivers to get it into forecourts around the UK. So the question is, what can and will the government do to try and address that issue? Now, there have been some calls for the rules around HG drivers from around the world coming to the UK for those rules to be relaxed. The Road Haulage Association, for example, is saying that they should be added to a skills list, which means that it's much easier for people to come and work short term. I've got to say, speaking to people in government overnight, I don't think that's likely. They don't think that's the solution, although it's not been ruled out potentially as a stopgap. The Transport Secretary saying that nothing can be ruled out at the moment. The view in the Home Office is that it's just not a solution to this problem in the longer term, which does leave this question of what else the government has to offer. It keeps talking about jobs just now, and there's been a focus on making sure that HGV drivers get a bit more money, better conditions to make sure that more people are going into that job. In the last few weeks, because of some of the other shortages that Theo was talking about in his piece there, we have seen some other rules relaxed. It's a bit easier, for example, if you want to do the test you need to do to be an HG driver. That's been simplified, that process. There is also a slight change to the rules that HG drivers can work to mean that they can do some extra hours to try and clear some of the backlog. But I suppose that the question the government's going to face over the next few days, if this continues, is whether that's enough, and if actually it needs to have some pretty bold plans to try and address this issue.
Nick, thank you very much. And just a note for you, 7:30 this morning, speaking to Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary. So that's coming up a little later on this morning.
Other news to bring you. It could take more than a decade to clear the backlog of patients waiting for cancer treatment in England, according to a report.
The research estimates that 19,500 people who should have been diagnosed with cancer had not been because of missed referrals. Excuse me, our health correspondent Dominic Hughes has more.
The pandemic has affected all parts of the NHS, with cancer services no exception. One worry is the number of people who fail to get a diagnosis of cancer because they've not yet been referred for specialist tests. Now, a report from the IPPR suggests that could mean a huge backlog of cases we don't yet know about. The report estimates around 19,500 people have not yet been diagnosed with cancer because of missed referrals. Diagnostics is a big issue, with the pandemic leading to a 37% drop in endoscopies, a 25% drop in MRI scans, and 10% fewer CT scans than expected. NHS England says cancer services have now returned to pre-pandemic levels, but the report says if the health service was able to improve that performance by 5%, the backlog would still not be cleared until 2033. And the authors warn that without a big investment in equipment and staff, thousands of people will be left waiting for a diagnosis and treatment. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
Restaurant, cafe and pub bosses in the UK will soon be banned from keeping customer tips which are left for staff.
Until now, it's been up to business owners to decide whether the money is divided equally or put back into the company. The government legislation is expected to come into force within the next year.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.